With many South Vietnamese people facing an oncoming invasion from the communist north, they decided to leave everything behind in order to chase freedom from the oppressive government. Many didn't even know what to do, and with thoughts of evacuation in mind, couldn't even find a place to call home. The United States would take a firm stand to help aid and resettle these people so that they may begin their new life under the blanket of freedom. Guam, a lowly U.S. territory, would become instrumental in the aid of these refugees during Operation New Life. Even when the operation ended, some Vietnamese people called Guam their home. With nothing but the clothes on their backs, the Indo-Chinese refugees, which managed to be picked up by the United States, would be moved to the Philippine bases at Clark and Subic Bay by ship or by plane to be processed. However, with the massive amounts of refugees coming every day, these installments soon became overpopulated. With pressure mounting from the Philippine government to lessen the amount of refugees, the U.S. looked nearby to Guam for that island to be a processing point because of its great military presence there. On April 23, 1975, Guam officially became a point for the processing of Indo-Chinese refugees under the code name Operation New Life. 5,000 refugees were to arrive every day for them to be processed and transported to other camps within the U.S. The first official flight of 211 refugees landed at 6:45 a.m. local time in the early hours of April 23rd at Andersen Air Force Base. When they disembarked their plane, they were met with hospitality from many groups, including the Red Cross and military dependents that had volunteered. With the massive influx of refugees and inadequate housing for them, the Air Force reopened the old barracks at Andersen, which was nicknamed Tin City. While at the old Naval Hospital Annex at Assen, the 4th U.S. Navy Construction Battalion, or CBs for short, started to clean up the old buildings with more help coming from a cleanup crew sent by Governor Ricky Bordallo at noon. A camp composed of tents were also to be constructed on April 23rd at Rolte Point. Large portions of the camps were completed the following day, with refugees housed in them on the 24th. Many refugees were even housed in tents that were just erected hours before arrival. After arriving by plane either at Andersen Air Force Base and Naval Air Station Agana or by boat to the U.S. Naval Base at Appa Harbor, the refugees were to go through a processing point.
A government interagency task force set up by President Gerald Ford was to handle the processing refugees on Guam for their immigration into the U.S. This agency also had a hand in many other responsibilities like the logistical problems that the island will face. After processing, they were shuttled to various camps with many sent to Orote Point. With more and more refugees arriving each day and their population reaching to tens of thousands, many concerns in the local population concerning where the supplies and food were coming from. By May 4, 1975, 60,000 refugees had already arrived on the island and funding for them was running out. President Ford urged Congress to increase funding for the refugees, but for the meantime, the camps on Guam had to cut costs wherever they can. Various improvements were made to accommodate a larger population but at a lower cost than before. Governor Ricky Bordallo urged the local legislature to allow local funds, but they denied it. They denied it at first because the federal government made no assurance that they would be reimbursed until a later point in time. Inside the camp, various services and opportunities to the refugees were given. Besides the doctors helping the fellow refugees, many of them formed their own newspaper. These newspapers were distributed among the refugees as a source of information for them. At Camp Asan, the first elected Vietnamese leader was chosen. At NCS, the refugees there formed their own cafeteria and laundry service to keep productive and self-sufficient as possible. Basic education classes were also set up by the Guam Department of Education and the University of Guam. The health of the refugee was a priority, and every measure was taken to ensure the safety of the refugees and the local population. Outside of the camp, the local population showed compassion to the refugees, with many people donating clothes and food to them. There were reports of the local population sneaking candy to the children at Camp Asan through the mesh fence. This was just one of the many signs of how the local people treated these outsiders. Some other refugees were even invited to the local fiestas held in each village. Many Vietnamese people were largely surprised by the hospitality shown by the local people to them. In the coming weeks, more and more refugees arrived than expected, and the camps were expanded bigger and bigger. By May 13, Guam had already received its 100,000th refugee. This was higher than expected. At mid-May, the highest peak of refugees on the island were 50,000 at a given point in time. Many Vietnamese arrived on the Guam, which further increased the refugee population. The harbor soon became littered with many Vietnamese ships that just stood there empty. Because of the closing of South Vietnam by the communists and an increase in processing at a greater speed, by the beginning of June 1975, the number of refugees on the island went from 50,000 a day to only around 25,000 a day. By mid-June, that number further decreased to 10,000. With a decrease in number of refugees and the coming of the typhoon season, Tent City on Orote Point, which held 40,000 refugees at one point, was closed on June 26. By July, most of them had been processed and moved, with the majority on the island were repatriates or people who wanted to return back to Vietnam. With the danger posed by the communist government, the United States encouraged these repatriates to reconsider their decision. The repatriates were to be sent to Guam until further action was taken, with the first flight of 200 from the U.S. arrived around 11:45 p.m. on July 5. Here, they waited for word on their return. Just a week after the first flight arrived, they held strikes and protests to the government to release them. More and more protests continued, and on July 24 and 25, protests got heated, but the U.S. Marshals were able to calm the situation down before anything big happened. By mid-August, almost all the refugee population on the island were the repatriates. Because of the constant protests, the U.S. decided to put all the repatriates into Camp Asan. Governor Badalio objected to the repatriates staying here even for a short while and proposed to the United States Navy to give them one of the empty ships in the harbor for them to return home by. It was heard, but not acted on. On the night of August 31, a violent demonstration resulted in one of the marshals being stoned and two buildings in Camp Asan set on fire. More protests continued throughout September, and negotiation with the communist government broke down over the repatriate problem. On October 1, it was decided that the repatriates were to go home through the Tuong Tin. With weeks of preparation for the voyage, they finally set sail on October 16. With the repatriate problem solved, Operation New Life came to a close on November 1st. Even with the end of Operation New Life, many Vietnamese refugees were still searching for their freedom from the communist north and end up on Guam. One such story is the life of Luc Thivo. Luc Thivo was only 22 years old when he had left Vietnam in 1980. 2 times he failed escaping the country searching for freedom, each time costing a fortune in Vietnam. On the 3rd try, he was successful in escaping. After this, he was placed on a crowded boat with other people. The collective term for all these people on the boat and those who escaped Vietnam were called boat people. His first contact was from pirates from Thailand. When they attacked them, they had all the civilians stripped down naked and took anything valuable. They then left the refugees for their own demise. 3 days later, a ship with the Red Cross came by and picked them up. From there, they were dropped off at a refugee camp in Indonesia. Here, he was able to contact his sister on Guam that was a part of Operation New Life, and she came here 5 years before. He took a plane to Guam and has lived here ever since, stating that it was the hospitality of the people that made him stay. There is no denying the role of Guam and the United States in the help of the refugees. In their hour of despair, we took a stand to help and aid them, whether it was the hospitality of the local population, the direct rescue of civilians, or a helping hand in getting them resettled. The United States and Guam were able to help these refugees start a new life under a blanket of freedom that they were searching for.